Excellent. So Scott, I mean, you have been working with biomaterials for a very, very long time. So was that an obvious step to go into the ink side of things, or work on something which is related to biomaterials?
Yeah, so my co-founder and I were in graduate school together, and we were working on biofuels. And so we're still interested in the fuel space, but we understand that large volume, low margins, and that there's probably better places to start than fuels in the chemical industry. So that's where we decided to go down the biomaterial space and get into more of that specialty chemical space right now. With the goal of going into kind of that mainstream and competing with commodity chemicals in the midterm to long term. So ink and coatings just kind of came up for us, but yeah, it's for us, it's a go-to-market strategy with a bigger vision.
Understood. So if I were to gain some clarity on the vision that you have, so can you tell me in terms of application areas which are the fields that you're going to target in general, I mean, that you may have plans on?
Yeah, so if you look around your office right now, if you see anything that's black, everything from an iPhone case to headphones to my pen, plastic, a lot of the things that are black in our world come from carbon black, which is made from petroleum or oil. And so our solution is, all of our solutions are transition away from using a finite material like petroleum or oil. So yeah, we can make everything from plastics to rubbers to foams to leather goods, all the way to inks on a shirt or a package. So high level, we're a carbon negative, carbon black company producing pigment, and then our go-to-market strategy is an ink. So we can make black ink that goes in everything, like I said, from a package to a book to a shirt to a shoe.
Got it. That makes sense. So right now, in terms of packaging material, I mean, we have seen certain startups facing roadblocks from the regulatory side of things. So for example, I mean, if you're using the ink in food materials or food packaging, I mean, there may be FDA who might need to approve your product. So have you faced something on those lines?
Yeah. We're kind of playing in the cosmetic space right now, which is heavily regulated. And we are working with a lot of different companies in the food space where there's direct and indirect food contact regulatory issues. So yeah, we're starting to go down that road. For us, when we print on a shoebox, for example, there's very little regulatory and compliance. So for us, we're kind of starting in those markets, but right now is the time to start going down that road of kind of getting through regulatory issues related to kind of what you mentioned, the food packaging, for example.
Understood. That makes sense. So I was thinking about ink, I mean, and the go-to-market strategy that you have. And so I have been talking to a lot of founders and CEOs out there, and they're solving different problems. Some of them are solving problems in food and beverages industry. For example, sugar reduction is a hot topic, right? I mean, everybody wants to go healthy with their products. But the problem with those solutions is that there needs to be something that changes on the customer side, on the shop floor. I mean, there is an additional part that needs to go in. There is some constraint that changes the whole process. And that's why sometimes the journey to actually getting fully accepted by the industry or the customer is a bit slow. When I was thinking about ink, I mean, do you have something like that? I mean, are there any barriers or frictions like that from the consumer side? I mean, people who are your client?
Yeah, I mean, I think, all the products that we make right now are drop-in solutions so that we can send that product to any kind of printer or factory and they can use it the way they normally would. So we're trying to reduce the barriers of entry there. So there's no special equipment or special processing necessary. We're working on scaling our black product right now because we check the boxes of color and all the other specifications needed. So we try to make that conversation easy. On the consumer side of things, it's interesting because a lot of consumers have very little idea about some of the materials that are in the supply chain, ink being one of those, right? So one of the first customers I called up years ago, a big brand, I said, what kind of ink do you use? And they said, I don't even know what ink is, So I think that was probably 5 to 6 years ago. And I think things have really turned a corner when it comes to the consumer understanding materials and wanting to know what's being made and or what's being used to make the products. And the brands are very interested, where now they actually are thinking about every molecule in their supply chain, from the pigments to the inks to the coatings. So yeah, sometimes it's just good storytelling of using something that is sustainable material. And sometimes there's, we work with some companies right now where 99 or 98% of their material is bio-based. and they're still using a petrochemical colorant, and they say, hey, you're solving our problem. Or another example is traditional carbon black from petroleum's on Prop 65 in California is cancer causing. And so we get some companies, especially in the cosmetic space, calling us up saying, we want to get all Prop 65 chemicals out of our supply chain. So in some ways, we're solving very direct problems, and other times we're more of that softer storytelling opportunity for some of these brands to do something different and talk about it.
And that's very interesting. So, compared to 5 years ago, where people were not even aware about why should they be thinking about ink to right now. Is it the sustainability and the consumer kind of trend shift that has happened towards sustainability, which is the major reason of the awareness? Do you think that?
Yeah, I think it's my personal opinion is that, it's the consumer that's demanding product that is sustainable. Coach, the leather goods company, just launched a new brand called Coachtopia. Yeah. And I think it's done pretty well in terms of getting traction in the marketplace. And that's all about sustainability and telling stories and using novel materials. And so, we're starting to see a lot of success stories with that younger generation using their dollars to kind of vote on what materials they like to see out there in the world. And then I think the other thing is there's a lot of investment groups out there who are putting kind of top-down pressure on some of these brands to make changes and to kind of fulfill on their ESG requirements and making sure they're doing sustainable things. So I think it's kind of a pressure from the consumer and pressure from some of the investment community out there to say, let's make a change together and actually really drive it and try to calculate that change.
Got it. That makes sense. And I think congratulations on the deal. I have been
nice.
Going through your Twitter feed, and I could see that. It has been continuous deals after deals. New names are being added, new brands are being added. So congrats on that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So are we talking only about color black, or are we going some other colors also?
Yeah, we founded the color doing colors. And, a lot of the industry people that we talked to in inks and coatings said, if you do black, you'll be very successful if you do that well. And so they said, 40% of ink in the marketplace broadly is black. And so that's where we've started. That's kind of where we're driving revenue and driving all these brand projects with the full intention of launching colors. There's, that's still more in that R&D phase, but we do see pathways to get into some of these markets and really tell that bio-based colorant story across multiple colors. But again, when you look at the carbon black market and the carbon black ink market, they're very large, billions and billions of dollars worth of market there. So part of my biggest challenge right now as a founder and CEO of Living Ink is the incoming requests from all of these different industries, right? So, coatings that go on metals and rubbers and roads. And there's just, request after request. It's all very intriguing and I'm very curious about all of it, but we have a relatively small team still, so we can only take on so much.
So maybe the next question that I want to direct to you is, what is that challenge in terms of going through this commercialization plans that you have? What is the biggest challenge? Is it cost? Is it going to be something else? What is it?
Yeah, it's, for startups doing materials like Living Ink, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg scenario, if that makes sense. So, we need big contracts and commitments, but big groups like some of the big automotive companies, they don't want to make those commitments until we validated that we can fully scale it and we are, price parity. And so, that's always been one of the biggest challenges. We've got a few ways to kind of navigate that right now, which is kind of exciting for us. But I'd say that's one of the big challenges is getting down to the price parity within the petrochemical industry and then being able to kind of fully scale the business in a very fast yet methodical way to deliver on all that promise. So that's one of the big challenges.
Brings me to the point, you talked about competition. Right now, the competition is going to be large billion-dollar chemical companies which are out there. But are they really your competition because they're not working towards sustainability? Sooner or later, demographic shifts, consumer awareness, consumer demands, this is going to also make them work towards their ESG scores. They moving in a direction, and especially when somebody like you is already out there who is providing a solution, who is giving a proof of concept that this can work, this is practical, this is something which is scalable, right? Currently, who's your competition? Is it still those billion-dollar companies, or are there any other startups who have worked in a similar domain like yours? Do you have a sense of the landscape there?
Yeah. There's a couple companies doing some similar things to us, not with our story or our starting material, but like one of the groups that you highlighted, I think in your write-up is like Gravity Labs, right? So it's a good different story. Like there's just a different value proposition. And, the way that I always frame that is there's, these are massive markets. So there's going to be, we're going to need to take all these different waste products from all these different sources, make valuable materials that can really scale and make that impact. So, I think that we do have some competition when we're kind of competing for brands and, potential investment. But, in reality, I see some of those groups as more as collaborators where we're all kind of going together to try to, we have a very, very, very small part of the market right now. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a few groups out there. And then the big $1 billion companies, yeah, I think they talk about sustainability a lot, but I think that their view on innovation is, I think, small innovation steps, where ours is a very big leap and a completely different story than what they're familiar with. So I see the word sustainability thrown out around there a lot. And I think it's important to tell the brand like how we're very different.
The last question that I wanted to ask you, and then we'll be done with the interview after that, is, so I was talking to somebody who had a very good product solution. It was sustainable. The customer was a very, very big brand. In fact, one of the most well-known brand in the world. They were having the problem. They're looking at startups who could collaborate with them, but they never actually shook hands on that. And that was a surprising thing for me. There is a problem, there is a solution. Yeah. Why do not people shake hands on that and maybe collaborate? And the answer that I got was that even though they have the problem, the bigger problem is of bottom line. They don't want to compromise that bottom line. So have you also experienced something like that from the industry? What is your general feedback in terms of challenges like this?
I think that's what, I think, sometimes I go to some of these conferences and I have a pretty good network of individuals that are doing kind of biomaterials, and, we kind of talk about how the world should be designed a little bit differently in terms of materials, and then you start working with like an international factory who's used to moving, billions of dollars of product, and like, they don't want to hear about anything different. They're getting paid to do exactly what they've been doing for decades, right? Maybe even over a century. So I think it always comes down to bottom line. And I think part of the value for these biomaterial companies that are doing this is being able to talk about the value that's being provided. And if there's a storytelling value, if there's an ESG value in kind of their report, like that value is there's starting to be a lot more value there in the climate space than there has been even, 2, 3, 5, 6 years ago, right? So I think the value is something that needs to be talked about a lot. But then, yeah, you're right. In the end, it's all about price point, bottom line. And getting down to that price parity. So I think the good news is I'm seeing a lot more openness to have conversations, even if you're not at price parity. Even within some of the large apparel companies, like there's a lot of different categories, right? That some say, hey, we got to be at this price point. Others say, hey, we got some flexibility. So just being able to understand that. I think less of the challenge for us is about price parity right now, and it's more about the overall sales motion that these big companies do, right? Like they have, it's very impressive that the world works as well as it does, right? That we can make materials, we can ship them around, it can get put together, it can get shipped back to a place, and it can get sold. Like, I'm sure there's the day-to-day challenges, but it's pretty optimized, right? And you start bringing in new suppliers and new raw materials, and all of a sudden that sales motion starts to become less efficient. So that's why for us, we always talk about being a drop-in solution so that we can fit into that sales motion, because once we get outside that motion, whether the brands love it or not, it just becomes hard to adopt and to use if it's not hitting their specs. So and then the last thing I'll say about that is even within a brand, you've got so many different people that maybe one person in sustainability loves it, but then the person, in quality control is like, I don't love it. And my whole job is to make sure I don't let anything through that can't pay, right? So you have all these different people within these large groups that we have to kind of jump through the hoop and to make happy. And so I think that's one of the bigger issues than even just the bottom line. And it does affect the bottom line if it's more time and resources. So yeah, that's where we focus a lot of our time is, hey, let's lower the price point and get down to price parity, but also let's make this easy for all of our customers to adopt.
Hearing your answer, I think at least the real challenge is something that is visible to you and your team in terms of how to increase the sales, how to become mainstream, how to realize the vision that you had to become a chemicals company, a core chemicals company, and then contribute to the world in general, as many applications area as possible. It was very insightful talking to you, Scott. And I think I learned a lot more than how or what I would have learned from your websites, from your talks, from any secondary material that is out there. And I think, this is going to be useful to all our readers as well as some of our clients also that subscribe to it. And hopefully, that makes some positive change towards the vision that you have. That's my hope. So thank you again. Yeah. Thank you for talking to us. And then thank you for being so patient with the type of questioning that I have. I don't know, if these are the type of questions that you have been used to hearing, or are these questions mature enough or not? But those were the ones that came to my mind and I thought I'll ask them.
Yeah. It's great questions. Yeah, no, it's great questions. Thanks for having me on and for chatting about us, and let us know if there's ever any conversations that we can have. I mean, my job is to always talk to as many people as I can and get the word out there, especially to groups that are working in the large kind of areas of these supply chains. So, no, good questions. I like the failure question. It's looking back, on my wall, I've got a picture of our first kind of true pilot plant when it's completely empty that we actually filled with equipment and people. And so I always kind of look at that picture because it's like, when you see a blank slate, you go, oh my gosh, like we're starting from nothing. Like we have to come up with ideas. We have to come up with equipment. We have to get the money to get the equipment. And so there's so many things that you have to do. And I always look at that picture just saying, we have a proven track record now. We've been able to jump on those hurdles. So kind of build that confidence to kind of continue down the road. So that's a really good question.
Excellent. Glad that you liked it. And I think for me, the next few 100 sessions are going to be as educational and illuminating as yours. I hope that, and I'm going to continue with that. And I'm going to share before we finalize this article, or if and when we publish this, so that you may have a look at it and let us know if there's anything that we want to change.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, I appreciate your time. Reach out anytime you want to connect.
Sure. Thanks, Scott, and good luck.
All right. Thank you. See you, Vikas. Bye.
Bye-bye.